What is up, YouTube? C here, and last week, UFC 324, we had, a fighter pass out literally on camera on the first Paramount card, which brought back the discussion of what can we do about these weight cuts. And just to give some more info about this, Cameron Smothering, he made weight, and then as he was walking off the stage, as you can see in this photo right here, he passed out face first, and he was hospitalized. Now, he did go on IG later and was like, I didn't even cut all that much weight, which is just, you can see the nose on his face get a little bigger as he says it. But really though, Dana was probably like, hey man, just, I'll give you a little bonus if you don't say nothing. Just don't say anything. But this brought back discussion of what can we do about these weight cuts. We gotta weigh these fighters same day. We gotta, other stuff. And let me just be blunt. You can't stop this. There's literally no way to just stop this, because here, I'll give you the first reason. It costs, and I know, here, actually, let me give up some of the solutions that some people have given. And the first solution is hydration tests. Now, people like to bring up one championship doing this. Let me just be honest, this has not worked at all. Because literally, people have found ways to just bypass this. And there's actually one video by MMA On Point where they talked with the guy. He helps guys. Literally, this scientist, fighters really pay him to help them out. Cheat the hydration test. And basically, how they do it is, they cut weight normally, and then when they pee, they drink a bit of, water, or I believe they mix their urine with distilled water. And then it kind of helps even out the water, so it looks like they're a little bit hydrated. And the scientist guy, he actually said that this is dangerous because fighters are just gonna be cutting more weight, and they could just do this, and they'll actually be like I said, they'll be putting their health at more of a risk. And also the second reason why this is bad is it costs a lot of money. Now, if you know anything about one championship, it actually has failed to be somewhat profitable. Now the numbers aren't really all that public, and the head guy, Chatri, I believe is his name. He's like say all these things, but there's been a lot of stuff that's come out where it's not really as profitable. And also, like I said, money. Let me ask y'all this: the UFC hosts at least 40 events a year. Now, and again, ask yourself this: when is Dana going to be willing to do that? And if he does, it adds up quickly, because then you gotta do this for a minimum of 10 fighters every card, and that's minimum 10 fighters, because that's at least how many fight, how many, excuse me, minimum 20 fighters, because there's at least 10 bouts. If the card, some fights get canceled, or some just don't pan out. And it's gonna add up. Like I said, it's gonna add up, and we know Dana doesn't like. Literally, these fighters, they're, if we were to profitize, or oh, fuck, I'm gonna use these big words, man. If we were to put into perspective on how much the fighters make versus how much the company makes, they make like 1/5 the revenue, and other 4/5 of the revenue go to the brand, everybody else, for profits. Now, like I said, is Dana really going to be willing to, use any of that money on hydration tests? Fuck no. Because then that makes, adds money, adds time, and, fighters, and literally, there's a solution to, stop this. And also, it doesn't even work. There was this dude, the Italian dude, Mikey Musumeci. He actually, had health complications when he tried to make weight for one grappling, even though he had like a 10-pound lot. And also recently, like the same week of the UFC card, this girl, Helena Crevar, she missed weight by over 20 pounds, bro. 20 pounds. That is crazy, man. Okay, well, I guess Paul Costa technically missed weight by 20 pounds, but that's another thing. And so yeah, this is like the first, this is actually, I feel like this is the main reason that UFC won't ever do this, is because it costs a lot of money, and fighters are literally at more risk of missing weight. And actually, let me give the second solution that people have come up with. Now, for the second solution that people have come up with, people have said let's do same day weigh-ins. Now let me tell you guys something. As a wrestler, as a guy who, as a former wrestler, guy who did, used to do wrestling, we did same day weigh-ins. And now let me tell y'all something about this. Same day weigh-ins for wrestling are already brutal enough because here's the thing. It's basically like you get like an hour, maybe two if you're lucky, before you compete, with weigh-ins. Actually, it's usually an hour. 2 hours is like there's like a huge delay or something crazy. Now, if they did 7 day weigh-ins for UFC bouts, that's just flat out dangerous, cause you're getting punched, man, and also the reason why they do weigh-ins the day before, so that way you can eat, get your weight back to a semi-normal level before it spikes out, and then you're at least somewhat healthy. If they did same day weigh-ins, these guys would be very much at risk of way more health complications than they already are, punching the shit out of each other in the head after making weight the day before. And so this solution is just stupid. Like I said, it's literally same day weigh-ins. And I mean, shit, some guys could still find a way to kind of cheat it if they have to if they want to gain more weight. And so that's like the second reason. I mean, same day weight, that's the second solution people have come up with, and it just won't work. And now for the third solution, people have said, let's just do fighters. Let's just not weigh fighters. Let's just make them all fight at their natural weight. Now let me be blunt with this, dude. A lot of fighters would be in shambles, bro. Like a guy like Sean O'Malley, who himself claims that he weighs around 155 to 160. He would get absolutely like fucked in the ass by most flyweights and bantamweights. Cause if I'm being honest, bro, like most flyweights and bantamweights, they weigh at least 150 to 170 pounds. And that's just, I mean, shit. I'm pretty sure actually Aljo got up to 180 at one point. And so if Sean was to, go against guys like that, then, it'd be bad. And shit, there's even guys, actually most fighters on the roster would be there would literally be no flyweight division. No flyweight, no bantamweight. Hell, probably not even a featherweight division, because most fighters would literally just, literally be that weight, man. They would actually none of those fighters would be that weight, definitely. Look, see, even I'm getting confused because it's like, oh shit, you literally just lose 3 divisions, 3 weight classes, 125, 135, 145, maybe even 155, and so now you would have 170, 185, 205, and heavyweight. And I mean, I guess that does kind of solve the problem of heavyweight and light heavyweight being shallow divisions. But like I said, these divisions, they literally poof, disappear. And so, I mean, this just, this literally kills MMA as a whole. And so, I mean, what are the possible solutions? Hydration testing, like I said, too much money, too many variables that you literally can't control. Same day weigh-ins, literally more dangerous than, weighing in the day before. And, well, like I said, just no weight classes. Literally there would be just a bunch of guys that literally 4 divisions get eliminated from MMA. And so, I mean, what can you do? There's literally nothing you can do. I mean, this is essentially the best system that we got. Weigh-ins the day before, some fighters miss weight, and so I mean, shit, it is what it is, man. And I mean, maybe in the comments below, y'all can give me y'all's opinion piece on this, whatever y'all's thoughts about this. But like I said, there's really nothing you can do, just nothing. This is, like I said, the best system I've got. And look, I know I've been reiterating a lot of things. This is more like rant style. I'll be honest, this is more of a rant style video. Cause and hell, there's like some guys that are like, man, Yuri could probably cut to 185. And that's another thing, people be like, man, these guys could definitely cut more weight. Yuri is 6'3", and he looks shredded as hell at 205. And most people are like, oh wow, he weighed in at 203. And so with Yuri, the reason why he weighed in at 203 is he basically cut too much weight. basically on the Joe Rogan podcast, after his fight with Jamal Hill, he explained, "Oh yeah, I sat in the sauna for a little too long, and I think he said he passed out, which I'm hoping is just me, having bad memory, but." Apparently the reason why he cut too much weight was because he like fell asleep in the sauna and was like, oh shit, I'm way like, I think he was like 190 or so, like a little below 200, and so he had to actually drink up so that way he wouldn't, weigh in under, so that way, people wouldn't, basically think, oh shoot, he might, get a little, fight might have to be called off because he cut too much weight, and that's another thing. These, there's a lot of people that are like, man, these fighters should, fight in, these other divisions. And people are like, oh, Paddy, he should fight at 170. Paddy would get molested by some of these fighters, bro, if he fought at 170. Like Michael Morales, he posted a photo, where he was on a scale, or that showed the scale he was on, and the number said 212. 212 pounds. Shit. And that's another thing, these fighters, they aren't. When people say, man, these guys weigh a lot out of camp, it's basically just empty, weight. Because here's the thing. Let's take, a fighter like Paddy as an example. Now, Paddy, he weighs, let's say, he said he weighs close to 200 pounds out of camp. Now, let me be honest. 20 of those pounds is basically just from a poor diet, So if he was to lock in, he would, let's say, like, he starts his fight camp, 8 weeks. He starts dieting. Now, he does say I believe before he said he eats like 1,500 calories in camp, which is very, very low, by the way. Very low. And so, he does that for, let's say, 4 weeks. He's already lost at least 10 pounds. At least 10 pounds, maybe 20 at most. And so he's hovering around the 170 to maybe, let's say he's hovering around 180, And then another 10 weeks, and then another 4 weeks, actually 3 weeks go by, and he's getting to 170. And so now, he's actually some fighter, let's say 175 for a reason. 175. He comes into fight week 175 pounds. And so now comes the hard part, the weight cut. And so he's, like I said, 175 pounds. So he starts eating, the same, but he starts, drinking a bit more water, and then maybe reducing his calories just a little bit. Let's say 1,300 calories. 1,300 calories as soon as the fight comes up. And so now he's gradually losing a bit of fat, or what little fat he has by that point, because he's already likely in good physical shape at that point. So loses little fat he can. He drinks a lot of water. He drinks that water. He starts overly hydrating himself, so that way his body's holding more water. And so by the time, the Thursday comes, the day before weigh-ins, after the press conference, as soon as he gets back to his hotel, he starts his weight cut. And so at that point, he's already maybe 170 to maybe 165. He's in the 165 to 170 range, the day before weigh-ins. So he's about, 10 to 15 pounds over the weight class. And now he has to cut, a good amount of water out. And let's say he's doing this for, the interim belt, which, by the time this video comes out, has already happened. And so he has to weigh, 155 or below. And so that means he has to cut from, like I said, hopefully 170 pounds to, 155. That's a 15-pound water cut. So so what it looks like is basically there's a bunch of ways you can lose water. You can just do some light exercise. You put on a lot of clothes. Here, let me give you an idea of what Paddy might be wearing. He's probably wearing long socks. He's probably wearing some shorts, maybe an extra pair of shorts if you can, some sweatpants, maybe extra pair of sweatpants, and then he's wearing a long sleeve, maybe a t-shirt on top. Maybe another long sleeve or t-shirt if you can somehow fit it, and then a jacket. And maybe he's wearing a beanie too, why not? Now that's, most of that is, pretty main stuff. Maybe for additional, help with sweating, he might wear, some sauna suit, maybe. A sauna suit to help him sweat more. And so that's, like 2, 3, 4 layers of clothes that he has on him. And, it's just covering his body. He's already, pre-worn. And like I said, there's many ways you could start the weight cutting. You can exercise, light exercise, which like I would do this kind of where I would put on layers, and then as wrestling practice starts, I would start sweating, and then by the end of the practice I sweated out at least if I properly water drink a lot of water, dieted the right way, I lose easily 8 to 10 pounds, you know and so now that's one way to do it. And so now the common way these fighters will cut weight is maybe they'll go into a sauna. That's maybe that's the only way they'll cut weight, if they're lucky. But let's add on to that, if they need to be sure to cut that weight, they may get on the exit, they may grab an exercise bike, put that in the sauna, and so they're basically working out in a really hot room with a bunch of sweat, with a bunch of clothes that are covering their body. They're already feeling pretty warm, and now they're even more warmer, and now they're just exercising. It sucks, man. It's just not fun. You're sweating your balls off. You're working out. It's basically like the worst workout, but very uncomfortable. And so that's the second way some of these fighters cut. They work out and they sweat. And the third way is to add on to that, actually no, they'll go into a bathtub. That's another way. They'll go into a bathtub. It's hot. Maybe they'll get out. See, there's a lot of ways. See, I'm trying to literally think of, some of them, they'll like put towels on them, or they'll get into a sauna box and sweat in that. And then I remember seeing from this the fight dietitian, this guy, he works with guys like Leon, Volk, Izzy, what's that dude who fought Pantoja last year in the summer? I'm trying to think. Kai Kara France. Kai, I'm trying to think. I forgot. Basically, it was bathtub, swim, towels. That's another way to cut weight. And now here's actually the last way some fighters cut weight which was actually said by DC, which DC on the Joe Rogan podcast. DC found out from Aljo, some fighters will when you cut weight, man, it actually is very hard to go to sleep because you're hungry, you're exhausted, and that's just bad sleep the next day, or literally the day before weigh-ins. So you're exhausted, you're tired, you haven't eaten, your throat's probably really dry, you're thirsty. And so what fighters will do is they'll actually cut most of their weight the next day, so that way they can actually sleep well, and so. And the reason why this is dangerous is because you literally only have a limited time depending on when you wake up. Imagine you only wake up let's say, I'm pretty sure the live show, it runs from 10 to 12, depending on what time zone you're in, if you're in the US, 10 to 12. And so if you wake up let's say around 9, that gives you 1 hour before the weigh-in show starts, and you got to get to the weigh-ins. And so you're cutting weight for an hour. Let's say you wake up 1 hour before the weigh-in show starts, so that gives you what, let's say 10, 11, that's 2 hours to cut weight. And so imagine you're actually in a rush. You didn't even get the chance to check your weight, so you're cutting all this weight, and then boom, you get to the scale, and then boom, you're still 1 pound over, so you didn't check. It's oh shit, I kind of timed this wrong, and then boom, you fail to make weight, your body's exhausted. And I mean, this is probably actually the worst way to cut weight, because you're literally screwed if you don't, if you're in a rush. Now, if you're smart, you'll wake up early, cut the weight, maybe you're in a bad, you're feeling like shit for an hour or two. And so, I mean, it can work out, but like DC said, and when you really think about it, it actually is pretty bad, because you literally could lose your fight that day. It's basically a gamble on whether or not you could cut all that weight. And so, I mean, what else can I add on to this? There's really nothing much else. Weight cutting is it's not going to be solved. It's going to stay as a part of the sport from wrestling culture, and it being the effective way to at least weigh in the right way, and at least get some of your weight back, so that way you're not a pushover. And so, you know, like I said, there's not really much else to add on to it. I mean, shoot, I mean, hopefully Cameron, he's good. You know, I know a lot of these guys, you know, they like to make fun of these guys for missing weight, or, you know, shit, or, you know, they'll just give them grief about it. But this is probably one of the hardest, you know, aspects about the sport. And so, I mean, yeah. So if you made this far into the video, really appreciate you, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Praying that everybody out there is safe, and that's all I gotta say, y'all. Peace.